Welcome to Niagara Amusement Park and Splash World in Grand Island, New York. This park began life in 1961 as Fantasy Island, and it's been through many changes of hands since then. Most recently, Gene Staples purchased the park in 2021 and began its refurbishment. And there you can see Splash World over in the distance. But over here in the vast parking lot is a sign of things to come. Gene Staples saved not only this park, but also Clementon in New Jersey and Indiana Beach. And I was really thrilled that he saved this park because I've always liked Fantasy Island. It was for many years owned by Charlie Wood, the legendary Charlie Wood, who created Storytown in Lake George, New York. And it was built up very much as a kids park. And it has a western town, and it had a canoe ride out on a little pond where there was a scene of an Indian village. It was very much rooted in the 1950s and 60s mentality. But here we can see the new era beginning. This is a Schwarzkopf shuttle loop, a really big looping ride that Gene Staples got used, and they're going to refurbish this and install it in the park. There's the massive flywheel that powers it. So I'm really excited to see what is going to happen in 2023. Supposedly a lot of this is going to be ready to go. There is also a well-known dark ride from Rye Playland in New York, and that Gene Staples acquired, and that's going to be rebuilt. So they're going to have a dark ride here, a fairly well-known one. And they're also going to have a Wild Mouse coaster that's in the process of refurbishment, and a lot of other stuff. They had dozens of rides in this park at one time, and now they're down to pretty much a handful. So let's go in and see what is in the park this year as they start getting things ready. So there is the fountain, and the diamond-shaped logo is very similar to what used to be for Fantasy Island. And we're going to make a sort of counterclockwise move around the park. Now, this is the train station right here for the Iron Horse train. And there's another video I did of the whole ride on the train. And they do have a show that takes place at 5 o'clock on the train. It's a Western sort of bank robbery show, which is great for the kids. Over here, still in the center of this entrance plaza, is a carousel. This is an Italianate carousel. And if we go to the left, that is the entrance to the Western town. They're having a show there right now. In fact, you're going to hear some gunshots go off. And no, it's not shootings in the park. It's part of the Western show where the bad guys are getting theirs. So we're going to go this way and then meet up with Western Town from the back end later on. So here's the Kittyland Cafe. It used to have the amusing name of Boschetti's Restaurant. And there are some restrooms over there on the left. And in front of us is one of the more complete sections of the park right now. This is Kittyland, with a lot of new and used rides that were just brought in this year. Over on the right is a miniature golf course, a pretty nice one, and that's open for business. Off in the distance you can see Grand Island Boulevard, which is where the park is located. I was really impressed with what I saw in the park this year. Gene Staples and his crew, Dana, the general manager, they had a Herculean task to perform to get this park ready for this year, because the park was previously owned by a company called Apex, which owned Indiana Beach, and they also owned Clementon. And essentially, they went belly up, and they simply took all the rides out of the park and then just abandoned it. And the park was essentially left to vandalism, and they trashed most of the park. You know, bathrooms were smashed to pieces. concession buildings were smashed up. So they had an enormous job to try to get things usable just to open this year. So I was really in admiration of what they had done. This little empty pavilion you see in front of you used to be the classic Mother Goose ride. It was an antique, and it was supposedly being restored by Apex, but it never made a return. And then in the back here is a Dodgham Car Arena. This used to be Wacky Worm. If you remember my previous video of Fantasy Island, which I'll have a link to in the description, that was a little Wacky Worm that they had installed there. That's gone, and now they have a Dodgham car. This area of the park is open. Under Apex, it was closed off. And over here on the left, you can see that huge fish. That is a Pinocchio display for the kids. It has a little narration of the Pinocchio story, and you look in there and there's a window and you can see Geppetto inside the whale's mouth. There's Alice in Wonderland, of course. And then you have a few more rides in this area. A little kiddie Red Baron jet ride there, and a little autocar ride in the back. And there are 3 houses left over from the old Fantasy Island days. You have the Crooked House right here. And then next to it is the 3 Little Pigs. And then next to that is the 7 Dwarfs. Right now they're just empty buildings, but I assume eventually they'll be populated with some figures. This big pedestal here used to house the giant from Jack and the Beanstalk. There was a huge beanstalk that went up. There's a yellow brick road going to a well. And there's an antique Herschel autocar ride. There's a kiddie train ride. You may have noticed in passing the Herschel helicopter ride that was back there as well. And there's a drop tower that the maintenance crew is still putting together. And there is a stage, and they have a pirate show that goes on for the kids there during the day. Here's the back of the carousel that we saw earlier. You can see a little archway in the distance there. That's the entrance to Western Town. And there's a gift shop that has some nice Niagara-themed gifts. Here's an arcade. Now we're in the northeast section of the park right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk around to the northern area and then head west from there. And we're going to end up in sort of the northwest area of the park and then head back down south to the east. Now there's a path over on the right across a bridge, and that heads to an entrance to the Koa Campground that's right next to the park. And they used to have a deal where if you go to the Koa Campground, you could get tickets to the park, and they have a special entrance right there, and the train would pick you up and bring you right into the park. So that was a nice convenience. Over here on the right, you can see this rather grim-looking pond. This once was a canoe ride, and you can see a teepee way out there. There was an Indian village, you know, with just statues in the middle. And at one time, kids could go onto the island and explore it. And that long since has disappeared. But the park decided not to go with canoe rides. It's just logistically challenging, and I guess the insurance companies pretty much wouldn't really like it much. And they may be bringing back something on the pond. They're not sure what yet, probably something like paddle boats, but they will be reusing the pond in the future once they clean it up. And you can see here's a row of old-timey photo booths. If we take a left, that would bring us up into Western Town, but we're going to take a right here and keep heading toward the west end of the park. There's a Scrambler that's new in that area. And also, if you head, there's another view of the pond and how extensive it is out there. But if you were to head to the left over here, that's one of the entrances to Splash World. And Splash World was created by Charlie Wood when he took over the park. The park was purchased from Charliewood in 1994 by Martin DiPietro, and he renamed it Martin's Fantasy Island at the time, and undertook a pretty big expansion of the park and did a really nice job with it. It was a really fun, family-friendly park under his management. And in 2016, DiPietro sold it to Apex Parks, and Apex Parks closed it in 2019. So now we're coming up on the other big section of the park. In front of us is the calling card of this park, the Silver Comet, which DiPietro built when he took ownership of the park. Stored in this park was the Crystal Beach Comet from the closed Crystal Beach Park in Ontario, Canada, and Charlie Wood took that and reassembled it at his park, The Great Escape, formerly Storytown in Lake George, New York. And so DiPietro built this as sort of an homage to the Crystal Beach Comet. It's nothing like that ride, which was a double out and back. This is more of a twister coaster, and it is a great ride. This is an amazing coaster with really intense ride, lots of laterals, lots of airtime, but really smooth. They did a beautiful job working on this ride in the off season, and when we rode it, it was like a new coaster. It was running beautifully. Can't recommend that coaster enough. It's well worth coming to the park for. Now you can see all these other closed buildings. There are arcades and games that were in here. And you have a flying scooter ride that's temporarily over on the left here. They're going to move that somewhere else. But that's it for the Midway for this season. They essentially have closed this area off, and what they've done is they've taken a lot of the ride pieces that they're going to be building for next year, and they've used this whole area as a staging area. In front of us with this car tire, these are pretty nice restrooms that they have in there. You know, just regular like porta potty things, but a slight cut above a porta potty because the restrooms were trashed by vandals. There's the back end of the Silver Comet, and here you can see some of the structure of one of the rides that they're going to be putting in there. And I'm not positive. I think that might be part of the Wild Mouse coaster they're going to be building, but I don't know, because there are a lot of pieces all over, and there are actually two storage trailers full of rides further down this section of Midway as well. So they still got a lot of stuff to do. But you can see how basically this whole section of Midway was just left to rot by Apex Parks when they left. So I'm looking forward to next year when this should all be operating again. And here's a whole collection of game booths that are all up and running. And that's it for this section of the park. Normally it would go much further down there. There's a Ferris wheel that's still up. It wasn't running, but it's way at the far west end of the park, by where the antique car rides were. And that little bridge there is yet another way to get into Splash World. This season, the park was only charging $20, no parking fee. It was free parking, and $20 for all day. So I thought that was a reasonable price for what was in the park. For, you know, grandparents with small kids, that was a bargain, because the kids would have fun spending all day here. For adults, there's not a lot to do at this point. Silver Comet was great. I was there with a special outing of the Western New York Coaster Club that I'm a member of, and a lot of the members were really excited that the park had reopened, because this really is a wonderful little park, a treasure in upstate New York, in the Western New York area. Just outside Buffalo, and of course, given the name of the park, it's right next to Niagara Falls. So if you're coming out to this area, naturally, you can check out Niagara Falls while you're there as well. So there's the Scrambler. It's a really interesting fencing around it too, the wooden fencing. It's nicely done. It's really feels like more of a Western ride. I've not seen a Scrambler put together in that way, but it fits the theming in this area. And these are all people coming from the Western show that just finished. So we'll go up through Western Town. And this building you see in front of us up on the hill, that used to be a little Western themed gift shop, and that hadn't opened up at that point. And in front of us now on the right is the barbecue barn, which is the main eatery in the park while we were there. It had a collection of sides that we could eat. It had some macaroni salad, potato salad, cornbread, and baked beans, but the rest of it was all meat. And in this little building here on the right, that's where the staging area is for the actors, so the kids can go in there and meet some of the actors in the show. And over on the left is the Golden Nugget Saloon, which serves Perry ice cream and other sweet treats. And there's the general store, which we saw earlier. And this is that arched entrance into Western Town. And there's the carousel in front of us, the main concourse. There's a sweet shop, which has even more sweet treats. And with that, our brief tour comes to an end. So obviously, this is still a work in progress, but I am thrilled that the crew was able to get this place open for 2022, and it's a really good sign of what this place has in its future. So I'll be back here in 2023 to see the progress of Niagara Amusement Park and Splash World in Grand Island, New York.